Just moments ago, something unfolded on live television that was so subtle it could have been overlooked, yet so profoundly human that millions across the United Kingdom felt its weight almost instantly. Prince William, a figure long defined by composure, discipline, and the carefully cultivated restraint expected of a future king, paused mid-sentence. It was not dramatic. There was no stumble, no visible loss of control, no sharp intake of breath to signal distress. The hesitation lasted only a few seconds, fleeting in time, yet in those seconds something shifted. His voice, typically calm and measured, softened almost imperceptibly. His eyes, usually focused with unwavering precision, flickered inward, a brief shadow of reflection crossing his features. For a fleeting but unforgettable moment, the heir to the throne ceased to appear as the embodiment of monarchy or ceremony. He appeared instead as something far more universal, a father, thoughtful, burdened, quietly carrying the weight of responsibility that no crown alone could measure. The engagement itself had been designed to follow a familiar script, one of many meticulously arranged public appearances. Prince William was addressing a youth initiative, a gathering meant to highlight leadership, responsibility, and the shaping of the next generation. The speech was polished, carefully structured, and forward-looking, designed to inspire without veering into the personal. The tone at the outset was confident, the language precise, each line weighed and prepared. Yet as he spoke about guiding young people through expectations they did not choose, about duties inherited rather than sought, the atmosphere in the room began to shift imperceptibly. His cadence slowed. Words he had delivered countless times before seemed to carry new resonance. The air itself seemed to tighten, as though the room collectively sensed that something rare was unfolding. Those seated closest, the senior members of the royal family, exchanged fleeting, knowing glances, not of alarm but of recognition. Cameras remained fixed, recording every subtle inflection, every carefully measured gesture, capturing a rare moment when protocol softened just enough to reveal the humanity beneath it. The transformation became most striking when he spoke of the future of his children. There was no breakdown, no dramatic loss of composure. The poise remained intact, yet behind it lingered an unmistakable vulnerability. It was quiet, restrained, and deliberate, a glimpse of a father trying to navigate the impossible balance between private love and public duty, between the instinct to protect and the responsibility to perform. Viewers across the country reacted not with shock, but with recognition. The moment felt real. It felt unguarded in a way royal appearances rarely do. In that shared silence, millions sensed the weight of his thoughts, the complexity of his position, and the emotional labor inherent in being both heir to the throne and a parent striving to shield his children from the glare of history. And almost immediately, questions began to circulate. What had prompted that brief hesitation? Why did a carefully rehearsed, meticulously planned speech suddenly carry a personal, intimate undertone? Why did so many interpret this subtle emotional display as an unspoken message, perhaps about Prince Louis or the challenges faced by the next generation of royals? It is crucial to understand, there have been no official statements suggesting hidden circumstances, no verified revelations, no secret disclosures. What unfolded was not scandalous, it was not a crisis. Instead, it was something far more relatable, a father standing at the intersection of public duty and private responsibility, striving to reconcile the immense weight of legacy with the profound intimacy of parenthood. In that brief pause, Prince William did not reject protocol. He did not break the unspoken rules of the monarchy. Rather, he stretched them subtly, allowing a sliver of personal truth to shine through without compromising the dignity of his office. That delicate equilibrium, maintained under the unrelenting scrutiny of national and global audiences, is precisely what made the moment resonate so profoundly. It reminded viewers that behind the symbols, ceremonies, and centuries of tradition, there are individuals grappling with the same universal questions of love, protection, and the pressures of raising children in a world that watches their every move. Even the smallest gestures during that brief pause carried weight. The softening of his gaze, the thoughtful pause before continuing, the subtle modulation of tone, all spoke volumes more than words alone could convey. In those seconds, the nation glimpsed the private heart of a man who carries the extraordinary burden of history while striving to nurture the ordinary joys, fears, and responsibilities of fatherhood. For a generation accustomed to seeing the royals as untouchable figures, symbols of continuity, ceremony, and discipline, this was a startling reminder of their humanity. And that is why the response was immediate and widespread. The emotional power of the moment did not lie in revelation, scandal, or surprise, but in recognition. Recognition that the future king, for all his titles and obligations, shares a universal struggle, the balance between duty to others and duty to family. In the hours that followed, analysis and reflection spread across social media and news outlets alike. Viewers discussed not what he said, but how he said it, the cadence, the pause, the subtle shifts in posture and expression. Observers pondered the invisible pressures of modern monarchy, the complex balancing act of raising children under extraordinary expectation, and the emotional realities that public protocol often obscures. The moment reminded everyone that legacy carries weight not only in history books or ceremonial duties, but in quiet, personal moments that are rarely shared, yet resonate universally. This brief, unguarded glimpse into Prince William's private heart was not scandalous. It was not a breach of protocol. It was a demonstration of the power of human vulnerability, restrained but undeniable. It revealed a father who bears the extraordinary weight of public life while striving to remain present for his children, reminding the world that even within the rarefied corridors of monarchy, the demands of love, care, and responsibility remain timeless, immediate, and profoundly human. In the hours following Prince William's subtle but unforgettable pause, the quiet drama of that moment began to reverberate far beyond the walls of the hall, slipping into the hushed corridors of the palace itself. There were no leaks, no exposés, no dramatic confrontations. Nothing in the immediate aftermath suggested scandal, yet the significance of those few seconds was unmistakable. The pause became a symbol, a mirror reflecting a tension that had been quietly building within the monarchy for years, a tension between the rigid expectations of tradition and the growing societal demand for transparency and authenticity. For centuries, discretion has been the monarchy's most reliable shield. Difficult decisions, sensitive matters, and especially the challenges faced by its youngest members were kept behind closed doors, carefully managed to maintain the appearance of stability. Silence was not just a policy, it was the institution's most powerful instrument. But in that brief hesitation, that almost imperceptible shift, the protective power of silence seemed to falter. In an age that prizes openness and values emotional honesty, restraint alone was no longer enough to contain the human realities of life within the royal household. Observers of royal life have long noted that Prince William approaches his role differently from the generations before him. Where the monarchy emphasizes continuity, ceremony, and the careful observance of precedent, William demonstrates a heightened attentiveness to individuality, his own and that of those around him. Where protocol demands measured distance and emotional control, he sometimes leans toward openness, subtly but deliberately. His pause was not an act of rebellion. It was not a crack in the system or a challenge to tradition. It was evolution expressed in a single fleeting gesture, a recognition that the monarchy is not merely a series of titles and symbols, but a network of human lives, each carrying its own burdens and vulnerabilities. Within palace circles, reports suggest that discussions intensified in the wake of the moment, not about revealing secrets, but about recalibrating tone and perspective. At what point does discretion slide into detachment? How long can expectations be imposed on children who never had the chance to choose their roles? And how does an institution rooted in centuries of ceremony and hierarchy adapt to a world that increasingly regards emotional honesty as a strength rather than a weakness? Princess Anne, widely respected for her pragmatism, her discipline, and her unwavering commitment to duty, has long been considered one of the stabilizing forces within the royal family. While there have been no public confirmations of confrontations or internal disputes, commentators have speculated that voices within the palace do not always align. Some are staunch defenders of tradition, emphasizing the need for continuity and discretion above all else. Others, more attuned to the shifting cultural landscape, advocate for measured transparency and emotional authenticity. At the same time, King Charles carries the weight of safeguarding not just the family, but the institution itself. His reign began during a period of scrutiny and transition, with public trust, media attention, and modern expectations converging in ways that had not been seen before. Throughout it all, stability has been his guiding principle, yet today maintaining that stability requires more than cautious preservation. It requires nuance, adaptability, and an acknowledgement that emotional transparency, when handled thoughtfully, can strengthen the monarchy rather than weaken it. In this evolving landscape, William's brief pause was more than a momentary lapse in protocol. It was a signal. It was a reminder that the institution he represents exists not in isolation, but in dialogue with a world that watches every gesture, interprets every word, and scrutinizes every pause. The act of showing a human moment, so small, so fleeting, yet so profoundly expressive, forced the palace to confront a question that has never been fully addressed. How does a centuries-old institution remain both revered and relatable in a society that increasingly values emotional truth alongside ceremonial tradition? For the monarchy, the challenge is delicate. It is not simply about maintaining appearances or managing perception. It is about acknowledging the humanity within the hierarchy, recognizing the burdens carried quietly by those born into its lineage, and finding a way to balance public expectation with private care. That balance is particularly difficult because the stakes are generational. The pause in William's speech was not just a reflection of his personal experience. It was a window into the pressures faced by the next generation of royals, children born into history, heirs to centuries of expectation, whose every action will be interpreted under the weight of tradition. It revealed that the monarchy's most enduring challenge may not be scandal or political scrutiny, but the quiet, persistent question of how to raise children in a world that is watching, judging, and interpreting every gesture. In the seconds that William allowed himself to soften, the palace, the public, and the monarchy itself were reminded that the human dimension of leadership is inseparable from the ceremonial dimension. Authority, continuity, and legacy are all intertwined with the very real experience of family, love, and care. And in that realization lies the delicate and ongoing evolution of the British royal family, a movement toward a monarchy that can maintain tradition while embracing the human realities at its core. As the public conversation around Prince William's pause and Meghan Markle's reflective comments grew, attention inevitably shifted within the palace itself. The institution, long accustomed to managing perception with meticulous discretion, found itself navigating an unprecedented terrain. Reports suggested that behind closed doors, internal discussions intensified. Advisors debated the merits of issuing a statement, carefully weighing the potential fallout of any public address against the growing perception that silence was no longer a sign of dignity or prudence. For centuries, the monarchy had relied on ceremony, protocol, and measured restraint to shield itself and its youngest members from the glare of scrutiny. But now those same tools risked being interpreted as avoidance, detachment, or emotional indifference. Every passing day without a response amplified speculation and heightened public concern. The quiet, controlled walls of the palace suddenly felt less secure, as if the institution itself were being tested by the very transparency it had long avoided. Amid this atmosphere, Catherine, Princess of Wales, emerged as a subtle but pivotal figure. Known for her composure, discretion, and careful attention to both protocol and human impact, she has long been considered a stabilizing presence within the royal family. Her influence is rarely public, but it is deeply felt behind the scenes. Observers suggest that her approach combines quiet assertiveness with strategic timing. She does not seek headlines, yet her interventions often shift the tone of discussions in significant ways. In the context of this emerging conversation, Catherine's role appeared particularly consequential. Insiders indicated that she advocated for measured action and thoughtful reflection rather than reactive statements. She sought to protect her family while ensuring that the broader discussion about childhood, responsibility, and legacy was guided with care. Her influence, though subtle, underscored a broader challenge for the monarchy: how to navigate public scrutiny without compromising the privacy and well-being of the next generation. The public's reaction further complicated matters. Commentators dissected every gesture, every inflection, and every phrase from William's speech and Meghan's podcast. Social media became a mirror of collective concern as discussions extended far beyond the royal beat. Public figures from diverse fields, entertainment, sports, journalism added their voices not as experts on constitutional monarchy, but as people familiar with the pressures of growing up or performing under intense scrutiny. Their reflections emphasized a universal truth: expectation, if left unmanaged, can quietly shape, strain, or even erode childhood. In this expanded lens, Prince Louis, once a distant and largely symbolic figure, became a focal point for a broader societal dialogue about how institutions, history, and legacy intersect with the human experience of children. The narrative began to shift. Louis was no longer discussed solely as a future monarch in the line of succession, but as a child growing up in extraordinary circumstances, whose emotional and psychological development mattered not just to his family, but symbolically to society at large. Questions of duty, resilience, and tradition were increasingly intertwined with discussions of empathy, protection, and emotional authenticity. Debates proliferated. Some insisted that the monarchy's survival depends on enduring expectation, that duty and resilience are the threads holding centuries of continuity together. Others countered with a different perspective, arguing that suppressing vulnerability comes at a hidden cost, that shielding children from emotional care can undermine rather than strengthen legacy. Within the palace, this rising discourse created pressure. Advisors weighed every possible course of action, from strategic public appearances to nuanced private interventions, but each choice carried risk. A statement could be interpreted as reactionary, silence could be read as indifference, and even careful restraint risked misunderstanding. At the heart of it all stood Catherine, balancing the demands of tradition, public expectation, and family care. Her influence was not about dominating headlines. It was about steering the family and the institution through uncharted waters, ensuring that the youngest generation, Prince Louis and those who follow, could grow up safely, supported, and understood. In this moment, the monarchy faced a transformation not marked by scandal or political friction, but by human truth. It was a reminder that even in the most ceremonial and historic institutions, the needs of children, the quiet weight of expectation, and the visible humanity of its members are forces impossible to ignore. The conversation had moved beyond speeches, appearances, or protocol. It had become a reflection of society itself, questioning how authority, legacy, and care intersect in the modern era. And in that reflection, the royal family found itself at a crossroads, a choice between preserving tradition in isolation or adapting thoughtfully to a world that increasingly values emotional authenticity as a cornerstone of leadership. Then unexpectedly, Prince Harry stepped into the conversation, his presence immediately shifting the tone of the public discourse. Millions watched as he appeared on screen, a figure both familiar and in this moment profoundly raw. Unlike the carefully choreographed statements typical of royal protocol, Harry spoke not as a prince beholden to centuries of expectation, but as a brother, a son, and a man shaped intimately by the very institution now under scrutiny. His words were calm, measured, and deliberate, yet they carried the unmistakable gravity of lived experience. In describing William's visible hesitation and softened demeanor, Harry reframed it entirely. This was not a sign of weakness or faltering. It was courage, the quiet bravery of a man attempting to reconcile the weight of personal responsibility with the demands of public duty. Harry spoke of a childhood lived under relentless observation, where every smile, gesture, and expression could be dissected, and where vulnerability was treated as a liability rather than a natural part of growing up. He reflected on the lessons imposed early, that emotion must often be controlled, that feelings are secondary to duty, and that the institution designed to protect can sometimes unintentionally impose its heaviest burdens on the youngest members. Without ever naming names or revealing private details, he illuminated concerns long felt but rarely acknowledged, about the invisible cost of inherited expectation, the quiet strain placed upon children navigating roles they did not choose, and the subtle yet enduring ways powerful institutions shape the inner lives of those within them. In speaking this way, Harry transformed the narrative surrounding the royal brothers, where public perception had long framed them as opposites, the heir and the outlier, the dutiful son and the rebellious sibling. He recast their relationship as one defined not by division but by shared experience. The weight of expectation, the inheritance of legacy, and the lessons of restraint connected them, binding their stories together in ways the public had seldom been invited to see. The fleeting pause in William's speech, once a momentary anomaly, became a lens through which the public could glimpse the deeper emotional truths of royal life. The delicate balance between duty and humanity, the invisible pressures carried silently from childhood into adulthood, and the courage required to act with honesty within a centuries-old framework of tradition. For the monarchy itself, the implications were significant. The institution now finds itself at a delicate crossroads, not because secrets have been exposed or scandals revealed, but because the world has changed and the public's understanding of leadership has evolved. Authority is no longer measured solely by continuity, ceremony, or adherence to protocol. It is increasingly judged through the lens of compassion, emotional awareness, and the ability to respond thoughtfully to human experience. Leadership today demands more than endurance and resilience. It demands empathy, understanding, and the capacity to balance expectation with care. The future of the crown may well depend less on what is hidden or revealed, and more on how the family responds to moments like this, moments when humanity quietly asserts itself, when emotion emerges within the constraints of duty, and when vulnerability becomes a form of strength rather than a flaw. As the public conversation continues to unfold, one truth stands out clearly. This story is not about scandal, conflict, or failure. It is about evolution, both personal and institutional. It is about whether an ancient, revered institution can remain true to its traditions while embracing a more human, emotionally intelligent understanding of leadership. Above all, it is about safeguarding the next generation, not simply preparing them to inherit titles or ceremonial responsibility, but to grow within an environment that respects their emotional well-being, values their individuality, and allows them to flourish without the weight of expectation overshadowing the natural joys and struggles of childhood. In this context, Prince Louis and his peers become more than symbols of continuity. They are reminders that care, empathy, and thoughtful guidance may be the most enduring legacy any institution can pass on.